All right.
Assalamu alaikum, rahmatullahi barakatuh. Peace be upon everyone who's listening and watching. My name is Kenny Bommer. I'm the author of the book Consider Islam Disproving the Pages of Propaganda. And I'm going to here to moderate a debate with Nadir Ahmed and Gada. And let's start by letting you both introduce yourselves. Whoever wants to go, more than uh, happy to let whoever wants to speak first speak first.
Yeah, I can just go very quickly. There's not much to say about me. My name is Nadir Ahmed, and I've been making Quran and science presentations and, kind of studying about the miracles of the Quran. And I like to open it up for discussion with different types of people. So, Ghada, do you want to go next?
Sure. There's not really much to say about me either. My name is Ghada. I'm from Saudi Arabia, and I now live in the United States. I grew up in a very religious household, and I'm no longer a Muslim. So today we're just going to be talking about how Islamic miracles are viewed, I guess, from different perspectives, which is fun.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so what we're going to do, I'm going to be, from my understanding, we're going to give Nadir Ahmed an opportunity to come in for about 6 minutes with an opening and state his positions on the miracles in the Quran. And then there's going to be a 2-minute back and forth interaction for the remainder of the time. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that sounds right. Does that sound okay with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, sound good with you, Gada?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. Okay. So, Nadir, whenever you're ready, I'll start the timer for
Sure.
the opening, and
All right.
you're free to start whenever you're ready. Let me actually set the clock here for a second. So,
Can you
whenever you're ready,
guys, yeah, can you guys see my desktop?
yes.
Okay, great. So, what I'm going to be talking about is basically the miracles of the Quran. There are statements in the Quran which agree with modern science, which really, if you look at that, there's no way a human being could have known about it or authored it, because these are things which we just recently discovered today. Now, I just want to inform Ghada on what may take about 6 minutes, just to let her know what it is, and then she can give us her opinions and thoughts about it, objections and rebuttals, things like that. So the first thing I want to talk about is chapter 16, verse 16:8 and 69 of the Quran. You could just go into Google and just type 68, Quran 68, 69, and you should be able to read the verse for yourself here. What's interesting about this is that the Quran made 4 scientifically correct statements. Individually, they're not really that impressive, because maybe it could be luck, maybe it could be guesswork, maybe the person was observing the bee and that's why it happened, why he got it right. But we're going to see that these these what we call the natural possibilities are not going to make sense. But let's just read the verse very quickly. And Agada, you speak Arabic, so you could also read it in Arabic as well. It says here, then eat from all the, it's talking about the bees. It says, what is interesting about this verse is talking about the female bee. It says because in Arabic the animals are either male or female, or words are either male or female. So it says, then eat from all the fruits and follow the ways of your Lord lay down for you. So the first statement is, it said that bees eat fruit. Then emerges from their bellies a drink varying in color, in which there is a healing from people. So it says that the honey comes from their bellies and that there is a healing for people. So really there's like 4 scientifically correct statements over here. And I just underlined them. It talked about the female bee is the one which actually leaves the house and goes about in the mountains. If you look over here, I've actually underlined the scientifically correct statements. And that is true. We know that they're called a worker bee. They're the ones that leave the house and does the work like that. Then they said bees eat fruit. Again, that is scientifically correct. And then it said that the honey comes from the bellies of their tummy. I'm sorry, the honey comes from the bellies, and then there's a healing in it for men. And of course, we know that to be true. Now, if you click on the links over here, I got all the references from science, which substantiate that, yes, that it agrees with science. And I believe you have the document in front of you. Now, as I said, each statement is not scientifically miraculous. it's not remarkable to say one of these statements. It's hypothetically possible to say this, to say something like this. But to say all four in a row, no, that you cannot do. You cannot keep getting it right over and over again. You could excuse it as something which is luck. Maybe you borrowed it, like honey. Honey was known, before the Quran even mentioned this. We knew that already. But there were other, remedies and jams and potions which people use for healing. So there's a very big probability of getting it wrong. So the fact which I want people to understand is conducting scientific research in the desert and passing it off as revelation from God is a foolish thing to do. You're going to fail. It's not going to work. You're going to get caught. Yet the Quran defies this fact. It made 4 scientifically correct statements without a scientific error, and that doesn't make any sense naturally. Because if this was just some kind of research which he was doing, research is done by trial and error. If you're just observing the bee and you're going to pass off your research as revelation from God, you're going to make an error to truth ratio right around 10-1, something like that, okay? All scientific experiments have multiple failures before discovering an observable scientific fact. So this is the thing is why I'm constantly talking about this, that people say, oh no, this stuff can be observed. You can observe all this. It's the immediate knee-jerk reaction. Oh no, you're just doing research on the bee. That's how you're doing it. Whether stuff is observable or not, really, it's a waste of time. I don't want to spend a lot of time, talking, oh, you really can notice this stuff, because that's not the issue here. The issue is, if you're observing this, that means you're doing some kind of scientific research. You're gonna get it wrong at a ratio of 10-1, if even that, okay? And so we'd have an example of that. We have like Aristotle. Aristotle did research, and you can click on this link over here. And he made many scientific errors. Like, for example, he believed that the bees didn't have any gender. And there's many. And he had a lot of postulums, theories, ideas, which he played with. But when we look at the Quran, we got 2 verses with 4 scientifically correct statements, and that's not possible. So I tell you what, I think that's my time here. Let me open up.
You have about 15 seconds left.
Oh, okay. And yet Aristotle made no scientific discovery in his research, nothing remarkable or anything which is noteworthy. And he had 4 pages, almost 4 or 5 pages of stuff there. We got the Quran with 2 verses with 4 scientific. So Ghada, do you want to take some time to just go ahead and give us your thoughts on it?
Yes.
Before you begin, I just want to clarify that during this 2 minutes, if at any point you want to ask a question of the other person, then that's going to be incorporated. You're going to allow them time to speak during your 2 minutes, but that time slot will be allotted for your 2 minutes. You're able to ask a question, and they can respond. But we have to, I want to point out that is part of your 2 minutes. So
no problem.
Okay. So whenever you're ready, I'll begin.
All right. My first, rebuttal to this is that bees, or observing bees, keeping bees, was not something new to the Arabian Peninsula or new to Muhammad himself. I mean, it's been, for centuries since the hunter-gatherer times, where people saw bees and saw that they made honey, and it was something sweet, and they didn't know what it was, so they went and got it. It wasn't until about centuries, millennia or so later, when the Egyptians were the first people to keep bees as farming them, but they weren't able to extract the honey without completely destroying the hives. It took a while, until they were able to perfect the art of beekeeping. That said, the whole aspect of that the Quran makes scientific or accurate statements. I mean, the Quran sometimes does, sometimes it doesn't. It's a book, right? But when it comes to bees specifically, has been observed by several different cultures, including whether or not where the honey comes from, and also the scientific or the medicinal purposes for honey. It has been used in several cultures. It's not specific to the Arab culture or to Muhammad himself. And I'm not really sure if you can say for certain that the Quran knows that the bee's gender was female. In the Arabic language, I mean, we refer to the sun as female and the moon as male. And we also refer to most insects or most objects that do not have life in the female form too. Like tables are considered female, books are considered female. No, not necessarily, not books. Notebooks are considered female.
That's your time there.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you for that, Ghada. So yeah, let me kind of.
Okay, now your 2 minutes to begin.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Ghada. And as you can see, I asked Kenny to please moderate because the show when we were on Aaron Roth's show, it was kind of chaotic and everybody was just kind of interrupting each other. So that's why I put structure to this. I hope you don't mind.
No, I love structure.
So yeah, Ghada, I believe I mentioned and I addressed your points, you know, and this is good that way we could better understand kind of what the issue here is. Yeah, you're right. You know, people have been doing bee research, as I showed you with Aristotle, and there's others than them. Knowledge on bees was known, yes. But that knowledge on bees is muddled with many scientific errors at a ratio of, actually, I couldn't find anything which was really scientifically significant. So I can't even say at a ratio of 10 to 1. So the issue here is not how the Quran how it got it scientifically correct. The issue which I want you to understand is, how did you do it without screwing up? Because if you're doing bee research, it's done through trial and error. Observed bee research, that's done through trial and error. You're gonna be, if you're observing the bee and you're passing off your scientific research as divine revelation, you're trying to pull that scam, you're gonna get caught. It's a stupid thing to do. And that's what, and yet when we read the Quran, he didn't get caught. You should be at a ratio of 10 scientific errors to 1 truthful or accurate statement, at least something like that. I don't know if it's going to be 10. If you find anything, like if I were to do the research, I'm just trying to figure it out. What I would say a lot of dumb things. Like, for example, the female bee, I would have said, no. You know what? That can't be the one leaving the house. That's the one sitting in the house who's cleaning the house.
That's your time,
Is that my time? Okay, go ahead.
I actually want him to continue. Is it okay if he takes some of my time?
You want to, sure. You want him to have the next 2 minutes, or?
Yes, I want to hear the rest of what he said.
Okay, sure, absolutely. All right, go ahead.
Oh, okay, yeah, I'll be very quick. So the issue which I want you to just focus on is how are you getting it right without screwing up, without making errors? That's not possible. If you're doing research, you're gonna get it wrong. And the issue here is it made 4 scientifically correct statements without a single scientific error related to bees. And my point here is that's not possible. Honey was known. As I mentioned, many people knew honey. It was a remedy for many different groups of people, but there was also Galen's jam and other potions which are horribly harmful for you, which have no medicinal value. People use many other remedies as well. So, okay, there was a huge high risk of getting it wrong. If you're going to think, okay, let me think, what am I going to put as a remedy in here? There's a very high probability of you screwing that up and getting it wrong. So my point here is, which I want you to understand is, what I want you to answer is, how did he make 4 scientifically correct statements without an error? Go ahead.
Okay.
Because they were just general statements about honey that was known at the time. He spoke that, you know, they make homes on trees and in mountains, which is true. That they not pollinate, I don't think that's the exact word that it uses, but let me go look at it again, just to make sure. Yeah, it just says that it eats from different fruits, and then they make honey. honey has different colors and it has healing properties. I mean, I don't see how this is a miracle because everything that was said here was known during that time.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I have about this particular research. But one other question that I have for you, and this can take from my time and also go into his time because I really want to hear this. Why do you think Muhammad did observable scientific science? Like, why do you think that he, or not necessarily Muhammad, but whoever you think did this research, why do you think that? What part of like Sirah or Hadith did mention this?
Okay, before you answer that question, Nader, I'm going to start a new 2 minutes, and this is actually going to be applied to God. So this next 2 minutes, she wanted to go into her segment by asking you a question. So we're going to start there with another 2 minute segment. Okay.
Oh, okay. So just to answer your question, so I think you don't see an issue here because you feel like these are very general type of statements about bees. Okay, well, first of all, they're not. Like even 99% of people in this world today don't know that bees eat fruit. In fact, in my last debate with Jay Smith, they thought this was a scientific error and they were trying to trap me on this. So I said, did you Google it? Did you Google, do bees eat fruit? They Googled it and they found out they were wrong. My point here is, even if these are not general statements, like the honey coming in from their stomach, that's not something people knew, that they have something called a honey stomach. This is not things which everyone, like for example, I think if you want to, like there's some general things, like if you go to a picnic, the bees are gonna fly around and they're gonna be attracted to your food. That's general stuff. All right, that's nothing miraculous about that. Everybody can make general inferences about bees, but that's not what's being presented here. Okay, so if I came to you and said, oh, look, bees will be attracted to your picnic food. Bees sting, bees fly. There you go. There's a scientific miracle. Then you are right, Ghada. That's nothing really impressive about that. That's something anybody can figure out. But what I want you to understand here is if you are doing scientific research and passing it off as divine revelation. Now, I don't believe that's the case. I don't believe this is scientific research. I believe this is divine revelation. That's why he got 4 in a row right. So what I want you to understand that scientific research being passed off as divine revelation will not work. Okay? And what I'm trying to get out of you is, how do you explain 4 scientifically correct statements without a 10-to-1 error ratio? Can you provide for us an explanation on that?
Okay, and before you begin, once again, that's right at the 2 minute mark. So we're going to start with a new 2 minutes. And this is actually Nadir's 2 minutes. And so he's asking you a question that's going to allow you time to speak during this 2 minute segment. So you can start whenever you're ready.
All right, I guess what I can answer with you is that whenever, let's say that you're in an exam, and so multiple choice exam, and you haven't studied for it, so you decide to just pick B or C all the way down, and then some of them might be right, some of them might be wrong. So in this instance, the Quran didn't really bring anything new, in my opinion, and all it did was just talk about bees using the norm of what was known during that time. But it also does make other inaccuracies in the Quran itself. The biggest thing is that it brings stories as if they were fact, including, remember when we were in the Aaron Ra podcast, the Adam and Eve story is not a scientific miracle because it never really happened. All of the stories of different types of prophets, those, we don't really have evidence that they even existed, including Moses, including Ibrahim, including, Ayub, and all of them, like that's, nothing really lives inside like the belly of a fish if you go in it, or a whale, I guess, is one of the ways that was interpreted for it to be a layunis. It's just one of those, like you can't just concentrate on one subject and be like, well, it got this correct, let's not look at the rest. So give me another example that is not about general knowledge during that time. Because honey has always been known to have medicinal purposes, and bees have been kept since, God knows, since we started domesticating animals.
Okay, yeah. So, yeah, so we would definitely can talk about alleged scientific errors because that's also another important part. One of the things that make the Quran, you know, why we believe it's the book of
I'm
God and why we believe it is a scientific miracle is because there are no scientific errors. As regarding issues
starting.
of, you know,
Well, I'm so sorry. I
oh,
don't
go
mean
ahead.
to throw you off on your point.
No
I'm
problem.
starting a new 2 minutes, so this is actually Nadir's time at this point. Go ahead.
Yeah, and definitely we want you to bring that up. But as far as issues like proof of Moses, did he really exist or something like that? I mean, those are good topics we could talk about, but I feel like that's a little bit off topic as far as, you know, Quran and science. So let's just stay with the topic, and we want you all, after we discuss this, let's bring up what you believe are scientific errors or how the Quran contradicts science, things like that. We can also talk about that. So, you know, Ghada, I think there's something you're not seeing over here, and I want you keep thinking, okay, this is all easy stuff. Oh yeah, 4 statements about bees. No problem there. It's all easy to do that kind of stuff. Nothing new there. I mean, this is the way you're thinking about this. No, you cannot do scientific research without getting it wrong. Okay, what you're doing is this is like an oversimplification, and you're just thinking, oh, it's all easy stuff. Anyone can do this. Yeah, my grandma can do this, and it's not. The issue about bees eating fruit, 99% of people in this world didn't know that. Okay, the issue about talking about honey coming from the stomach, you know, of the bee, and they have something called a bee stomach. That's something people didn't know. You talked about ants, you know, that maybe this was like some kind of random guess of A, B, and C, you know, if you pick C, you might get it right. That's true. And I've actually done that on tests. And most of the time I get it wrong. So my point here is the analogy you gave a good example actually of what I want you to see here. If you're randomly guessing at this stuff, if you're doing research, you're gonna get it wrong. And what I think you're not able to answer here, and because I think there is no answer as far as the natural explanation is concerned over here. If you're guessing, you're gonna get it wrong. Eventually, you're gonna get some right, but you're gonna get some wrong. If you're doing research on the bee and you're trying to figure out what it does, you're gonna get it wrong.
And
So,
that's your
yeah,
time.
I'm going to give you, I just want to give you one last opportunity to explain why there are no scientific errors in the Quran related to bees.
Okay, and this is going to begin, got us 2 minutes.
Again, because bees have been kept and raised since the Egyptians were able to put them in essentially like farming them. So we have been able to observe bees as humans since back in the ancient Egyptian times. So all of these things have been known. Maybe not necessarily in the science that you read, like in Aristotle or anything in the northern areas where it gets cold, but in the areas where it's warm almost all year round, and you can farm bees like in Egypt, like in the Arabian Peninsula. These people were able to observe them. I don't understand why you think that this is such a miracle, because everything that was said was nothing. And I know you said, like, if this is a scientific observation, then you would have an error. And there are errors in the Quran itself when it comes to other miracles. This is just about bees. I would suggest that we, at least in my opinion, if we continue to just concentrate on bees, we're never gonna like reach a point.
Okay.
There are other parts. There's the, like for example, in Surah Al-Tariq, when it talks about supposedly, according to, was it Zaghlul, Najjar? He was the big one that like brought this up, I think, back in the day. I remember him, he was big back when I was in high school, when he thought that this means the black hole, but that's not necessarily exactly what it means. I actually would really like your take on this, if you don't mind, Nadir.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
No, because, and I'm not here to debate, like just to like put you down. I am actually interested, because when I was in Saudi, everything was given to us as this is a miracle and this is a fact. But I've never met somebody from outside that actually looks at this and researches this. So this is super interesting.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I don't mean to interrupt you. I'm so sorry.
No, I'm just saying that this is really interesting to me.
Yeah, and it's good that it's absolutely good. I love personally hearing you say that you actually have a genuine, sincere interest in finding what the truth is, and so that's a great thing. So Nadir, this is actually going to start another 2 minutes for you.
Okay, sure. So yeah, so let me just, I guess, you think that this is, again, this is all easy stuff to do. You said the way you get 4 scientifically correct statements without a scientific error in terms of bees. In fact, first let me correct you on one thing. You said, well, there's errors in terms of other, maybe there's scientific errors in other areas. Okay, let's say, let's just, first of all, there's not, and we want to give you an opportunity to bring that up, but let's just assume that there is. That doesn't explain, if you let's say you made a scientific error in terms of oceans, how oceans work. That doesn't explain how you got 4 in a row right in terms of bees. You're supposed to have at least 10 to 20 scientific errors related to bees. That's where the scientific errors need to be, because you're guessing, you're doing research. Now let's take your example. I'm going to show you how you can get it wrong with the example you gave. You said, all these things have been known. You can farm bees, you can observe them. And if you start copying from that source, that's a stupid thing to do. You're going to get caught. All these things have been known. No, they have not. There's no books which talk about bees eating fruit. There's no books which talk about it's coming from their stomach. There's no book which talks about the female bee leaving the hive and doing the work. We didn't know this stuff. Okay. If you start going to the known sources back then, it is riddled with errors and inaccuracy theories and things like that. So you are going to get it wrong if you do that. So that doesn't explain why we got 4 scientifically correct statements in terms of bees without error. You said you can observe them. I keep trying to tell you, and I've underlined this for you. All scientific experiments in terms of observations, you are going to make multiple failures before you get it right. So the 2 things you gave us doesn't explain it. So we can move on. It seems like you don't have like a really good explanation as far as why we don't see scientific errors and getting it 4 in a row. But so I'm ready to move on.
No, I can just give a quick answer, and that's because that work has already been done. The Egyptians have spent years, centuries perfecting it.
Okay, and let's stop there. We're going to start a new 2 minutes because I want to make sure it's.
No, that was it. Look, that's what I wanted to answer.
Okay.
I want to move on, and
okay.
I was wondering.
And it's actually your turn to speak, Gada. So.
No. I'm actually talking to you, Kenny. I was wondering if we could talk about Surah Al-Tariq, which is, I don't know what number it is. It is number. It's so weird to me that you guys actually look at it from like numbers. Sorry. What number is it? Surah Al-Tariq. Number 86.
Oh, which what is it? Is it about the backbone and the rib? Is that what it's about?
Oh, it's about a lot of things.
Okay.
Okay. I'm gonna pause for a moment and let her find her spot that she'd like to discuss, and then we'll start new.
Mm-hmm.
If that's okay. Is that okay?
I would like to talk now. Yes.
Take your time. Take your time.
So I believe the biggest thing that led to this discussion was actually the between, gosh, I don't even understand this, between the rib and the backbone discussion that we had. And I believe you said that this is true, and you kept bringing like the anatomy of things. And I believe I even showed you a picture of the male anatomy, and you still insisted that this was true if you looked at it from a certain view, if you looked either down like this, but it wasn't like, but that's not how humans are created. They are, essentially what happens is the semen comes out from the testes, and then it goes into the woman, and then it looks for the egg, and then, does the thing, and we get a zygote, and then the zygote becomes human. Where the semen comes from, it comes from the testes, which is outside the body, number one, and number two is nowhere in the region that is between the ribs and the backbone. So I would like you to explain from your point of view why you think this is a scientific miracle.
Sure, sure. Uh, let me start my 2 minutes here. So can you kind of see the diagram I got over here?
Yes, sir.
She
Okay.
still has 30 seconds left in her segment, her 2 minute segment. So she asked you a question. So
Oh,
you're free. Go ahead.
well, I think, were you done or? Okay,
Yeah,
yeah, let me just go ahead and start real quick.
there's
So,
only 15 seconds left in this 2 minute segment. So we're fixing to start a new segment anyway. So it's
okay,
okay.
okay. So, yeah. So, first of all, I think just to answer your question, you can see everybody can see my desktop. Okay, that's good. So that was actually when we talked about this on the Aaron Ross show. He brought up a lot of issues that really I didn't really know very well about. So he actually raised some good points. But in the end, he actually discovered a scientific miracle in the Quran. So the ayat in the Quran, I talked about, well, if you actually look at the verse in Arabic, it says water which emits from between the backbone and the rib. It doesn't really talk about semen. But let's just assume that it's
Then
referring
what
to
does
it
it talk about? It
metaphorically.
just talks about water.
Yeah, it talks about water. Yeah. But let's just assume that it's talking about semen. Let's just go along with that. So, if you look at what I talked about, how the semen, or actually at this point in time, it's seminal fluid, it goes up through the vas deferens. Okay, let's look at the vas deferens is this little blue tube right over here, and this is your bladder. And most people will know that between the backbones and the ribs, between this chest cavity right here, this is not where the testes is. This is not where the reproductive organs are. So they say, okay, well, this is a scientific error. But what the Quran is telling you, that between the backbone and the ribs, there's actually two cavities. It is true. It is between the one cavity is over here. But if you lay a person flat on his back, that rib cage becomes your x-axis, and the spine becomes his y-axis, just like what you see over here. In fact, let me minimize this here. I can't see it. And lo and behold, look what we have right between the backbone and the ribs. We got the vas deferens, and that's where the seminal fluid goes in between. So, if from mathematically that is correct, that the x and the y axis, we have seminal fluid shooting right between there, and this was a picture which actually you presented to us. So, if you look at it.
Yes.
If you rotate the body and put him on flat on his back, yes, you can see it. It's between the backbone and the ribs is right there. Go ahead.
Okay, and that's your time right there. Actually, I messed up on my timer, but that was 2 minutes and about 10 seconds. So
Yeah.
we're going to set a new 2 minutes. And Gada, you're welcome to respond.
I still don't see how where the ribs are all the way up in that cavity that what you're saying is in between. That's just the stomach. I don't understand how you are saying that this is between the cavity. That is not.
Mm-hmm.
The backbone is there, and if you go all the way up on the x-axis, like you just said, that is not that. Those are not ribs. That's just your stomach. Can you please answer?
Oh, sure. Okay, so let me walk you through the diagram here real quick. So
no, I understand the diagram. The diagram.
Okay.
This is what you said before, and again, I am answering you that you are incorrect, sir. What you are looking at right now on that x-axis, that's the stomach. That's not the ribs. The ribs are way up a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying, do you see this as the bladder right here? And can you see
the
that
bladder?
Yeah, okay. And do you see
Yes, that's the bladder.
Do you see this as the vas deferens?
Yes.
Okay. So the semen, or actually seminal fluid, goes up through here.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes through this tube over here before it shoots down. Now this is the prostate, and then finally goes out the male reproductive organ. So
Yes.
Now, do you see these as ribs right over here? These lines right here?
Yeah, that doesn't go all the way up to the ribs.
Okay, so we have this is an area of the ribs are now like the x-axis right over here because they're protruding up. The backbone is right over here. So you've got ribs here, you got the backbone right here, and you got the vas deferens right over here. It's right between backbone right between rib and backbone. Can you do you see that, Kenny? Do you have any comment on that? Do you see it?
Yeah, from a personal standpoint, I do. That's your 2 minutes there. But based on, yes, I do see that the Vas Devrin is located between there, but I don't want to be a part of this.
Oh, okay, sure.
So, but alhamdulillah. So, Gada, this is actually your next 2 minutes. So, you're ready to respond.
And again, I'm going to have to say this again, it is not in between. You can't manipulate the verse in order to make it look like it's correct. It is not correct. The vas deferens it doesn't go all the way up where your ribs are. Your bladder is way down, below your, I don't know, what do you call this? What do you call this area? Like where your bones, where your hip bones are. It's like in that area, that's where that's where the mass deferens doesn't go above to the point where it actually reaches you can see it in this picture. It does not at all hit the ribs. Like you're using this as evidence, but there's evidence against you because it does not in any way cross it. So I'm not really sure, like, do you have any other explanation? Because this is not correct. This is not going to, I don't know what you guys are seeing, but from what I am seeing right here, the mass deferens does not at all cross an area that is in between the ribs. The ribs are not like that. Not unless you like lean over, then maybe it will look like that. And even then it won't.
Okay, yeah, let me go ahead and answer that. So I think what you're saying is, in order for this to be correct, your understanding is that it has to enter into the rib cavity. Is that correct? Like it's got to enter into, it's got to touch the ribs.
Actually in between, because I don't know how you define in between, but for me, when I define in between, if I would say like these are two plates, it has to be actually in between them in this area in order for me to say that it's in between. And it has to be in that specific order and not laying down or bending over or whatnot.
Okay, Nadir, we're going to your 2 minutes.
Okay, so I think what you're saying is, first I want to make sure I understand you correctly here, that this vas deferens, it has to enter into the chest cavity for this to be correct. It has to at least supersede and go into past the ribs. Is that correct?
Yes.
Or at least touch the ribs. That's what you
at least
right?
Yes.
If I understand you correctly before I answer. That's your understanding.
Exactly what I'm saying. It has to be actually in between.
Yeah, it has to get it past the ribs.
No, I'm not saying it has to be past the ribs. It has to actually be in between the ribs and the backbone. Actually be in between.
Okay, but see, do you see the in between can have two different interpretations? Like we could say in between.
I guess that's the problem that we have.
Yeah. Okay. I guess then so you got like in between can be like, if you look at the diagram over here, Radha, you have ribs over here and you got the back, and you can see my pointer, right guys? Can everyone see my pointer? Okay. You got a backbone, which is right over here, and you got ribs over here. So some can interpret that, okay, this is right between here and right between here. That's one interpretation. Do you see that interpretation? You don't see it?
Because I have another picture that I would like
Sure.
to put that I think, let me see if I can post it to you.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and I'll click on the link you gave me and we can, okay. And can you see the, oh, you know what, it did not come through there. Let me post it over here.
Okay, and that's that 2 minutes. And Nadir, that's going back to you at this point.
Okay, so is this a picture you want us to see? Is that coming out clear, everybody?
I wish it was bigger.
Oh, is it too small? Let me see if I can make it bigger.
No, it's okay. It's okay. No. That's the one I saw. So go ahead.
Okay, so we've got there's a vas deferens, this little yellow guy right over here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you got the back, you've got the backbone over here, and then you've got the rib cage, which is going right here. Oops. You got the rib cage going over here. So we can say that vas deferens is between this point and this point.
Oh my goodness. How is it?
Isn't this little guy between here and here?
The ureter, I would say yes. That is definitely in between. The vas deferens, not so much. The ribs are up.
Yeah,
they are not in parallel, or at least as close to parallel as possible. If that guy is sitting down, maybe, but that person isn't sitting down. That person is standing up.
Okay, so so again, this is what I'm trying to kind of get you to see, Rada, is things can be interpreted many ways. So when we say between the backbone and the ribs, there is a cavity right over here that you've got the ribs right over up there. And then you got the backbone over here, and you've got the vas deferens. So we can say diagonally, look at that. Diagonally, we can see that as being between the backbone and the ribs. I mean, that's just one interpretation is what I'm trying to show you.
Yeah, but the thing is, you can't use interpretation as scientific miracle. It has to be very clear, very factual.
Okay.
It has to look exactly like that honey example that you give me.
Correct.
This is not like the honey example. This is an error.
You're right. If things have multiple.
What is in between the ribs and the backbone? There's the heart. There's the.
Okay, and this. So we're going to start a new 2 minutes for Gala.
Well, I do agree with you. You know, there are things which are open for interpretation. It can be interpreted different ways, and we shouldn't base that this is a scientific miracle.
Sure. I want to make sure that Gala is aware that this is her time to speak. So,
is it?
Yeah, it's actually your time to speak right now.
Oh, what I was going to say is that if you're going to use that word, if you're going to use in between, what is in between the vertebrae? Sorry, not the vertebrae. The backbone and the, goodness gracious, my English today has just gone out of my head. The ribs, you would say, yeah, the heart, the lungs, whatever else is in there. But the vas deferens is all the way down to where the pubic area is. That doesn't cross the rib cage. You're using something called interpretation to be like, yes, this follows my understanding of how anatomy is. But you can't say that for certain and call this a miracle. Now I'm done.
Oh, okay. Things are open up for interpretation. And you're right. What I want you to see that things, you know, we probably, when things are open up for interpretation, you should not state that this is a scientific miracle, right? I don't think so.
But you stated that this is a scientific miracle.
Let me get to the point which I believe is which Aaron Raw actually discovered. This is not it. This is not what I mean by that. I mean, because they are open for interpretation. Now, most people, as you are right, most people, and this is what Aaron was actually mentioning. Now, when you say between the backbone and the rib, you're always thinking about this chest cavity right up here. That's what everybody is familiar with. But when you rotate the guy, put him flat on his back, and you got the rib cage over here, you got the backbones over here, everything in between can also be considered between the backbone and the ribs. It's another interpretation. But the point which Aaron raised, which was remarkable. Now, this is where I believe he pointed out a scientific fact. He kept hammering me. He says, wait a second, the Quran, the verse doesn't say semen shoots between the backbone. That's not the word. That's not what's in there. It says water. Water is coming out between the backbone and the rib. Why did it say water rather than semen? Over here it says semen, many. This is the word for semen.
Okay. Okay, that was time for that 2 minutes. We're going to go to Gada for another 2 minutes.
I had a minute, 13 seconds.
It was
go ahead.
2 minute mark.
All right, no problem.
Okay, good.
Again, I have to repeat. You cannot manipulate the verse in order to make it correct for you. We're looking at it as anatomy. It doesn't matter whether somebody's sitting, laying down, standing up, running. It does not matter. Anatomy is anatomy. And in this case, the vas deferens does not, in any case, go anywhere between the ribs and the backbone. It is below and in the pubic area. The only thing that it has in front of him is a little stomach area, little pouch, and the backbone. So I still think that you're manipulating the verse in order for it to reach the conclusion that you want it to reach. And yes, it didn't say semen, it said water. Again, that's still not water. Seminal fluid is not water. It's mainly water, as most of our bodies are. Our bodies are mainly water. But that still does not answer, that still doesn't give me the whole like, oh, it's a miracle. The writer of the Quran would never have figured that out. And it's just a feeling. The reason that they say these things is because during that time when they ejaculated, they felt it coming from between that area. It's just how it feels. And that's why they said that. But it's, again, when you look at the picture, and the picture is right in front of you, the guy is standing up, not sitting, not laying down. The vas deferens does not go between the rib cage and the backbone. And it's in between, not in the general area of. It's in between. It has to be in between.
Ngada has 15 seconds left for her 2 minutes.
Agha, did you want to go?
No, I'm not.
Oh,
It was
okay.
15.
Okay.
Okay, so Nadir, we're back at 2 minute segment for you, and you can begin.
Yeah, so you feel like I'm manipulating the verse because I rotated the torso and put him flat on his back. If I understand what you're saying correctly. Okay, what do you mean by that I'm manipulating the verse then?
You're manipulating the verse to say like in between to mean in the general vicinity of. Even if you lay this person down, the vas deferens does not go up to the rib cage.
No, yeah, you're right. So, but see, I mean, I agree with you. The vas deferens doesn't even enter the rib cage. I agree with you on that. But what I was showing you was it doesn't have to enter into the rib cage to be between the backbone and the ribs. It can stay. It just needs to, and I think I've made my case here, and we're just going to have to agree to disagree. I've showed you that there's two cavities, which is between the backbone and the ribs. There's one which is, of course, the thoracic cavity right up here, but there's also another one where if you look at the X and the Y axis of the ribs and the backbone, is right there. I think we've talked about that enough. This is not a miracle. No, it's not a miracle. You could, if a person could try to figure this out on his own and start looking at these things, and and maybe they could have came to these conclusions. But what they couldn't have come to the conclusion with is that that semen comes up through the vas deferens. They're not going to know that. You said this is the way it feels when you ejaculate. I don't know.
I'm not a man, but that's
okay. That it feels like it's coming up from over here. I don't know about that. I think that's not something I've ever felt. And so
neither have I. I'm not a man.
Yeah. So what I wanted to point out to you, and again, this is my time is up. I think what my point here is, I think on this point we're just going to have to agree to disagree as far as if there's only one cavity versus two between the backbone and the ribs.
Okay, and yeah, that was indeed your time. So we're going to go to another 2 minutes for you.
Okay. I never said that I don't agree how many cavities there are. It's essentially one cavity that has all of it in here. It's our cavity where all of our organs are. My disagreement is that I think the interpretation you have of what in between is incorrect, because you mentioned that if you rotated it, but even if you rotate it, it's not in between, it's in the general vicinity of. It's just there. And even then, it doesn't necessarily, you have to manipulate the body by either bending or laying down and doing this in order for it to be maybe going towards the rib cage. And even then, it's because you're doing this. That's what makes it in between the rib and the backbone. But it doesn't actually, and maybe we agree to disagree. But how can you say that this is a scientific miracle in the Quran? Because that this is what the writer of the Quran could have brought in. Nobody else would have found that out. But it's wrong. how can it even be a scientific miracle if it's wrong? Yes, you can take some of my time.
Oh, okay. Well, I think so. You're agreeing it's in the general vicinity of whatever that means, and I think you seem to have your own understanding or interpretation of what. I don't even understand what you mean by general vicinity of.
Like,
So
this is in between. If it has to be in between, it is in this area of in between. It can't be that it's like all the way down where my elbow is, and you can't say that's in between.
Yeah. So it seems to
And
me
from
that
what
is
I'm seeing, you're going all the way down here to my elbow and say, yeah, that's in between these two. And I don't see that. That doesn't sound right to me.
That's a limit. I feel like that's a limitation that you're forcing upon the, so that you can generate a scientific inaccuracy. So when you limit
it's something that you are forcing on this verse to make it a scientific accuracy. Do you see where this is going?
Okay, so
let's just agree to disagree on that. I think you've been answered on that. And so you're right. We cannot claim that Quran is a scientific miracle based on this. And we got about 6 more minutes, I think, because we're going to talk for about just an hour. Okay. But what I wanted to show you is...
Let's start a new 2 minutes. I don't mean to interrupt. I'm sorry. But I actually forgot in my mind who went last. So it was you. Okay, so Nadir, this is your 2 minutes.
Yeah. Okay, so we had, what we base the scientific miracles off is things like what we just saw, that there were 4 scientifically correct statements in terms of these without a scientific error. That's not possible to do. Individually, maybe you could have guessed at 1, maybe 2 without error, but that's about it. We have pointed out to you repeatedly and to everyone listening that if you are observing, if you are this knowledge, if you're borrowing from knowledge which was already existing, that's a dumb thing to do. You're going to get caught because it's filled with scientific errors. It's filled with inaccuracies. If you're doing the research on your own, you're going to get it wrong at a ratio of 10 scientific errors to 1. That's the miracle. That's what I don't believe there is a natural explanation for. And that's just the beginning. We just talked about bees. Now, are there just 4 statements which agree with science? No. There's much more than that. So even if you can say, okay, you're a very good scientist, you did some great research, you're just at the level of Aristotle, that's okay. We can absorb that blow. Because now we can look at more statements in the Quran which agree with modern science. And in fact, one of the things which I bring up is how the Quran corrects the scientific errors of the Bible. This is not something you cannot make 4 scientifically correct statements in terms of these and then turn around and correct the scientific errors of the Bible. That's not possible to do all of this, as well as more statements which agree with modern science. So that's what it's a cumulative case. You got to look at all the evidences together. If bees is not enough, okay, that's fine. We can look at the other evidences as well. Now, I want to get back to my 30 seconds to get back to the issue about what Aaron Rob pointed out.
That was your 2 minutes there.
Oh, okay, never mind.
Yeah.
Sorry, my rebuttal, I don't know what to call it. My answer to that would be, I would really, really, really love, and actually I hope that this was it, that we were going to talk about the correction of what you think are inaccuracies in the Bible and how the Quran corrects these. I would love to hear it.
Yeah,
I don't have time, actually, unfortunately, like in the next few minutes I have to leave. But what I will say is that when you said like 10 scientific inaccuracies to 1, all of that, when it comes to honey, I've already spoken about it, so I'm not going to go back to it. I don't see that as a scientific miracle. It's just general knowledge that was known during that time. There are a lot of inaccuracies in the Quran, in my opinion, that I would love to discuss with you next, including what you said, scientific inaccuracies of the Bible, which I believe that this was what we were going to be talking about. But again, the Quran does not necessarily have everything correct. It does have inaccuracies that I would love to discuss with you, including what we just talked about, which was about where the seminal fluid or semen or whatever it is comes out of, because in my opinion, it's what I am looking at right now, the anatomy of the reproductive system of a male, the vas deferens, if that is what we're going to be concentrating on, does not, none of the area actually for the reproductive system goes anywhere between the backbone and the ribs, because it's below in the pubic region, where there's essentially another bone that is there to protect whatever's happening there, and not the ribs. But would you like to do this next weekend when we talk about the scientific inaccuracies? Because this is not about what we're talking about. This is not about scientific inaccuracies, but when it comes to, and this is just my interest. Like I love reading about religions. I love reading about cultures and that are different than mine. And I actually took courses in college about different interpretations for the different religions. Like I
don't mean to interrupt you, but that was your 2 minutes.
Oh yeah, sorry. I'm just saying that I love this, and I would like to do this with you guys.
Yeah.
My dear?
Yeah. Well, okay. So I think that's about an hour, and let me take the last 2 minutes. And so, yeah, definitely we could do this again. And I also like the idea of how we can kind of agree to disagree and walk away from this. But I do want to talk about, some of the Christian apologists, people like David Wood, Sam Shamoun, Christian Prince, and I'm sure you're familiar with him, Kenny.
There's a guy calling himself Christian Prince.
What's that?
There's a guy calling himself.
Yeah, this is what he goes by. They have all been, you see, what we find from these people is that they don't entertain these type of discussions. When it comes to science and the Bible, they run away. We have, and that's okay. In my opinion, if you believe there's issues with the Bible, it's got scientific errors, and you don't want to talk about it, you don't want to debate it, I'm okay with that. Well, but the deception of those people is that they were mocking and making mockumentaries and videos of the Quran and how it, quotes, contradicts science, when they knew that their own book contradicts science, and they don't come forward to discuss and debate these things. In fact, I just recently was in Christian Prince's room, and his audience said, hey, look, Nadir is here. Will you debate him? And he ran away. And yet this is a guy who claims that no Muslim can debate me. He's an Arab Christian. So at least, even if you disagree with everything I say and you think I'm a nut, and there's a lot of people who believe that, but even if that was the case, at least there is something you could pat me on the back that we are leading the discussion and the debate, and we are always open to entertain objections in terms of science, and you can always come to us and we're ready for a discussion and debate. But people like Sam Shamoun, David Wood, and the Christian apologists, notice how they are not. And I just wanted to just kind of throw that out there. And I guess because that's about an hour, I guess we should end right here.
Yeah, and I wanted to commend both of you for being very polite to one another. It's been actually been easy to moderate this situation, other than the time getting off here or there. But I do want to commend both of you for being polite and being respectful to one another. We certainly can't make any progress towards seeking knowledge and coming to any type of agreement or understanding by arguing with one another and being rude and being disrespectful. So I do want to once again commend both of you for. And so, do either of you have any last things to say?
I do, if you don't mind. Like it's very. One thing I want to say is that I'm very, very happy that both of you were very respectful to me. I have not had that with a lot of faithful people. Let's say they look down on me and they're very rude just because I left the religion. But again, like
you're Shia, right?
Full part, yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, also had horrible people say things about me because I'm Shia. Even though like I left the religion, they still say bad things about me, which is ridiculous. Like anyway, that's not the point. What I'm saying is that Kenny, Nadir, this was a great pleasure, and and you both were extremely respectful. And like you said, Nadir, we can agree to disagree, and it's totally okay. I mean, we both live in the same place. We're not hurting each other, and as long as your faith gives you hope, and that's great, and I love that. But that's not necessary is what for everybody else. And I admire that both of you are respectful of that. That's just, I want to say that.
Allah tells us in the Quran to invite to the way of your Lord with wisdom and kind words, and argue with them in ways that are best and most gracious. So that's the only way we can make progress. If we're insulting one another and we're making derogatory comments and belittling one another, we can't make any progress. We can't, you can't open someone's heart and their mind to hearing anything that you have to say if you're constantly trying to attack them in some form or fashion. So, yeah, so living up to our obligation as Muslims, and hey, even despite the fact that you are an ex-Muslim, I do want to commend you for your being very polite as well. So, alhamdulillah.
I don't hate people based on what they believe. That's the complete opposite of how one of the main reasons I speak as an ex-Muslim is because all I want is peace. Honestly, I want peace between both of us, Muslims and ex-Muslims. Because in the end, like, my family is Muslim, my whole family, my country, my friends, and I don't hate them. I love them.
Yeah.
And all I want is for them to succeed in life and to have the freedom to practice their religion. Because freedom of religion, in my opinion, is one of the biggest, most important human rights in this world.
Well, I started a recent podcast. I'd love to hear more about you and let you come on sometime and tell your story, inshallah, and just kind of get a perspective, from your perspective, why you left Islam, and have a discussion about that, inshallah.
No, I don't mind.
Sure.
I've never done it with a Muslim, so this is going to be interesting.
Yeah, we'll just have another peaceful conversation.
No, I don't mind at all.
I've gone on, just like Nadir mentioned, about going on with Christian Prince and engaging these people that are true hate mongers. They are true Islamophobes. They are hate mongers, without a question. Christian Prince is the worst of them all. And it's you're fighting an uphill battle when you try to go on with him, standpoint that he's going to out-talk you, other than the fact that he's manipulating his program, and he will try to out-talk you, because he will mute your mic and he'll just cut you off. When I call in, he just cuts me off and he blocks me, and so I have to call with an anonymous number, and it gets to be pretty comical at times. But alhamdulillah, but we can't make any progress when we're attacking one another and actually trying to instill hatred in the minds of other people. You can't do that. You can't do that if you have any sense of decency within you whatsoever. So
I totally agree, and I'm 100% with you on that. Hate does not really help, and on either case, like, I've had one of the things that I'm very sad about is the hate a lot of ex-Muslims keep getting, because we're not doing this for money or anything else. Like, we just want to be accepted by our families and our communities. Yeah. And I understand that when you leave the religion, you lose the community aspect of the religious part. But why are we losing our families, our friends, our essentially our neighborhoods? And it's very sad, because it's essentially a difference of opinion, right? We agree to disagree, but we still love each other. I mean, I don't know either one of you, and I love you. And this is how I do. I don't like spreading hate. I don't like, just maybe I like this person. I never judge people based on their looks or the religion that they follow. I base it on how they treat others and how they treat me.
Sure, absolutely. It's interesting that you mentioned, being an ex-Muslim, how, you have the issues with family. Being a Muslim, I've been a Muslim for nearly 32 years at this point, alhamdulillah. And the same applies to me. The more I've tried to live in obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the more I've lost people out of my life that are non-Muslim, family members, and which I come from a broken home, but the little contact that I have had with family is non-existent at this point, primarily because I'm a Muslim. And many of the people that I grew up with, went to high school with, and people that I knew in my community, I have very little interaction with them because I'm a Muslim. And when I'm around them, I don't try to force Islam on them. You can't do that. That's absurd. It's like trying to make someone play on your sports team. You can't make someone play for you if they don't even want to play the game. And so I by no means try to pressure anyone about Islam. I just try to be the best example of a Muslim as I possibly can be. But the more that I get, the more I've been more active in beginning to write the book Consider Islam. I'm writing the second book right now. So doing more public speaking, doing khutbahs, and all those things. The closer that I've got to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the more people that I've lost out of my life. And so I just wanted to point that out, and because it's I totally understand how you might feel regarding people who are trying to attack you. So the way I counter that is by trying to be polite and trying to understand and trying to engage them in conversation, and from your family standpoint, which I don't know your family, but you know, as Muslims, when we see someone that has left Islam, the objective is to be polite to them and to you know, to not ridicule them. Actually, try to open our minds up to listening to what they have to say, and to be objective and to you know, look for opportunities to share Islam along the way, and not put any pressure on anyone. Allah says in the Quran, let there be no compulsion in religion. Truth has been made clear from error. Whoever embraces the truth has grabbed hold of a trustworthy handhold that will never break. And alhamdulillah. So personally, I have a quote in my book. I said, without Allah, I'm a nothing. Without Allah, I am no one. I can't make it without Islam. With the day in, day out, going to the prayer, you know, I can't make it. So I'd love to talk to you more about your story. And
that'd be great. Yes.
Yeah.
And the thing is, unfortunately, Kenny, it's a problem with a lot of converts, whether converting to a religion and converting out of religion, like in what happened with me. You converted to another religion, and I've had that with a friend of mine when I was in college. She converted to Islam as well, and her family wasn't very supportive. And I've had people a lot in the ex-Muslim community that leave the religion when their family finds out. They get kicked out. They get, like, some of them even get death threats. But it depends how extreme the religion, how extreme the people are.
Sure.
But it's very refreshing that I find you too, and I look forward to talking to both of you in the future. And as I said, like, I find things intriguing. I love reading. I love literature. And I've read on the other religions just because I found them fascinating. I still have I have a Quran and I still read it. It's intriguing to me to read it from a different perspective other than just for worship, I guess.
If you love reading, then
my mom would love that. She would be like, "Why can't you read this book?"
yeah, you know, it may, inshallah, you know, I wrote it primarily for, you know, as a defense of Islam against all the propaganda that's used in the media. But yeah, I encourage you to purchase the book. Matter of fact, you live in the area, I'll give you a book, inshallah.
Kenny, you're in Houston, right? You're in Houston?
Yeah.
Yes, I am. No, everybody else knows I'm in Houston.
Well,
Hey,
I lived in Houston for about a year.
Yeah, yeah.
it's a great
I
city.
didn't know that. I didn't know you
Come
lived
back.
Yeah.
But do you have
Well, I tell you what,
already?
guys, this is over an hour, so let's wrap up right now.
Okay,
You want to keep
sure.
it short, yeah.
We can stop.
Okay.
Okay, guys. So
So
let's go ahead and stop at this point, and we can continue when you guys are free. If it's next week or whatever, I'll send you an email. Okay, Ghada?
Good. Yes.
Okay.
Next weekend I have I'll be doing a book signing event next weekend, next Saturday. But next Sunday, I'm free next Sunday, so inshallah.
Okay.
But all right, so assalamu alaikum.
Okay, I'm gonna sign out. Thanks a lot, guys. All right, bye.
Bye-bye.
Now that we stop